In exploring the different types of war games, we come to skirmish games. Now, on one end, we've got mass scale combat. Think of DBA, DBN, where you are literally commanding entire armies, entire armadas, entire legions. Then we've got war games where it's kind of that center top-down level. You're commanding a force. We start to see miniatures here being 1 equals 1, meaning 1 tank is 1 tank. 10 infantry is 10 infantry, and you've got 30, 40, 50, 60 or so models on the table. There's a big battle going on all around you, but you're in command of this one little snapshot. And then we've got skirmish war games where you're controlling 5, 10, a real handful of models. And in playing all of these different systems, the primary attribute of skirmish games is taking losses. Now, I am simplifying things a little bit. We never want to lose any of our forces, our units, our ships, whatever that's going to be. But in large games, you can take a certain amount of losses, including the army type, modified by the army type, and still be able to play the mission. When we get to kind of mid-level games, you could take a couple of losses, but you've still got what's called critical mass on the tabletop. And I'm sidebarring to a couple of different wargaming topics that I've pushed up to the Wargaming Tactics playlist here on the channel if you want to find out more about these terms, but I'm going to define them a little bit. Critical mass is where I'm trying to do something on the table, right? I'm trying to destroy that ship across from me. Well, doing the math hammer a little bit, taking into account for the swinginess of the dice, how many do I need to hit? How many scores will hit? How much damage can I inflict? How much will the shields or the armor block? And then the rest will transfer to damage points and I'll be able to destroy it. Critical mass is where you have a unit that's able to destroy other units. If I have 10 infantry with heavy machine guns, support, I can do something. I can engage. But when it gets to a point where I take losses and now maybe I have 3 infantry left, each with rifles, and I'm rolling 3d6 dice, I'm not really going to do much. I don't have enough critical mass to affect it. So when we get to skirmish games, what we see here is critical mass is vitally important. I've got maybe 10 miniatures. Now, one of those is going to be a leader, a big boss. Others might be special weapons teams, psychic magic powers if we're playing with that, and a bunch of regular troopers, but that's it. And obviously some armies are a little bigger, a little bit smaller, right? I might play a skirmish game where it's 15 miniatures, or I might play a skirmish game where you're elite, heavily armored with 5. It's extremely finite. So this changes the tactics tremendously. But the biggest challenge of a skirmish-based game, and we have to framework this jumping into some of the better skirmish rules that are out there that I really, really like, and the action points that I look for in a skirmish game, is this idea of I want to feel like I have agency on the table. I want to feel like I can win based on a little bit of luck, but also my solid tactics. If I make a poor choice knowingly, okay, and it doesn't work out, but I want to feel like I'm in control of the game. Skirmish games, because it's a small model amount, based on certain rules and the way things play out, because often what you'll see is you have a successful mid-tier miniature game, and you'll say, well, let's just kind of scale down the rules, make it light, so this way we could get people in to play skirmish that's going to feed in to our bigger game system. You know, you often see that with skirmish games. They're not really a standalone system. It's a feeder to your main wargaming system, where it's like, look, we get you to buy 10 miniatures, but then we know you're going to jump into the mid-tier, which is our flagship game, and you're going to buy hundreds and hundreds of miniatures and 3 or 4 different armies, and we've got you there. So the rules don't have to be that good or that engaging. But what happens is if you feel like you don't have any command, or someone can do something in one turn that destroys your army before you even act, then where's the excitement? You feel very powerless, and we don't want that, especially in skirmish. That happens in mid-tier or higher model count games, but especially in skirmish. So with that framework, the first thing that I look at for a good skirmish game is what is the movement and activation system? Traditional war games, right? Going back, the DNA, the genesis of war games was you set up your toys, I set up my toys, you move all your stuff, you attack all your stuff, you do all your stuff, I sit there, I might make some armor saves or some tests, reaction moves, and then I get to go. So it's called a you go, I go system. The challenge with Skirmish here is you go, I go allows in many cases where I can preempt you. If there's a mission objective and it's out in the open and you have to grab it, you have to take it, it's your turn. You move out, I'm safe, I'm behind cover, you can't see me, you've got no line of sight. It's now my turn, I move out 3 or 4 miniatures, I open fire on you, I kill you. There's this idea of I'm paralyzed while you're doing your stuff. There's no reaction. A good wargaming / skirmish system will have some sort of alternating movement where maybe you go first, but then next turn I go first. There's a lot of different ways to approach it. Or in the movement phase, you go first, right? We often break things down like movement, shooting, attack phase. You move all your stuff, I move all my stuff, but then in the shooting attack phase, we alternate units back and forth. It could be direct alternate units, meaning you move 1 unit, I move 1 unit. You move 1 unit, I move 1 unit. This idea of how that operates, attacking things could happen at the same time. Shots could be potentially resolved at the same time, where even if you kill me or remove a unit, I still get to go. So there's this idea of it needs to be a lot more interactive. That's the first thing I look for. As soon as I see a skirmish game where it's you go, I go, then I know it's built on dead tech. I know it's built on old stuff. And I'm not talking about playing older skirmish games as they were at the time. If I'm pulling down like a skirmish game from the 80s, I expect that because that's the DNA of how that game worked. But if I'm looking at a brand new skirmish game that just came out, and it doesn't have some sort of alternating activation or interrupts with how it plays, then I know it's just a quick, here we go, let's play, or it's feeding into another system. Now, second is losses, and this is where things get really interesting in that you take losses, you lose miniatures. I mean, it is a war game, it's going to happen, but because you have a small model count, you can get knocked out. If a skirmish game plays over a number of turns, often you'll see that a number of turns, you have X number of turns, 6 turns or so to complete the mission objective, whatever that's going to be on the tabletop. You can take losses even with these alternating activations because you're going to take losses. You make it to turn 3 and you're like, okay, I'm going to play this out, but I can't win. I don't even have critical model mass. I've got nothing for whatever reason. I made some mistakes. I got unlucky. I took a risk. What we see with older DNA type skirmish games, you lose models, that's it. Look, here's what you have to start. That's what you brought to the table. That makes sense. But if we pull in some imagination, skirmish games that allow you to bring resources back are very, very interesting. So I'm never truly knocked out, meaning, hey, it's a little skirmish, there's things going on. I lose 4 miniatures. Next turn, if I can bring back 1, 2, or 3, or 4, and they come in off a table edge, maybe they were just on the edge of the battle, or there's other skirmishes going on and some come over. It can definitely fit within the setting. So modern skirmish games that have a way to bring back resources, that means you're never truly knocked out. You might be behind, and you could be behind, but you're never truly knocked out. Well, Fritz, it's a war game. If you just cycle stuff back, then what's the point of taking losses? And then there's no tactics because there's no, I don't want to say punishment. There's no penalty for losing miniatures. You just bring them back. There has to be a resource system in place. This is the other side of the duality, where if I have a way to bring resources back in whatever level, then there has to be a penalty for it. What we see in some skirmish games is you have action points, where a command unit can say, okay, you've got 3 action points. The command unit could attack. The command unit could issue an order to another unit to cause it to attack or maybe buff it up, or it could bring back 1 unit. So this idea that if I'm bringing something back, then there has to be a penalty for it. There has to be a way to make that happen. The other thing is missions. Now, missions are important for any type of wargaming system, absolutely. And when I say missions, not that this is a criticism, I like going head to head. I blow your stuff up, you blow my stuff up. Let's have a big epic battle. There are many war games, big, small, and skirmish games that have that, and it has a place because it's a war gaming head-to-head type thing. But other types of missions are important. Recon an area, recover this, interact with this, do that. The missions need to be dynamic in that they have an element that is always changing, always forcing me to react. Say maybe like an objective marker that moves around. Now I'm talking at a very kind of high level type thing. Obviously the narrative and the myth of the game will determine how this crystallizes. But if I had an objective that moves around every single turn, an objective point that you need to capture, I need to capture, if it sits in the center, if it's like, look, capture the center, get in there, do what you got to do, then, okay, we pile in. The tactics are effective, but one-sided. We pile up, I stay in cover, I take some pot shots, some sniper shots, I try to outflank to pull you a little bit, pin you with my main group, outflank with the other, and then in the last turn, I just go all in and try to just swarm and camp on the objective. That's all it's ever really going to be. Maybe it changes a little bit based on terrain, but that's all it's really ever going to be. But if I have an objective that constantly moves, and maybe I don't know where it moves or how it moves for whatever reason, that now becomes very interesting because I need to be on that objective every turn, possibly earning points, but I need to be fluid to be elsewhere and try to anticipate while at the same time dealing with you try to kill me and me try to kill you. So skirmish games really need to have really, really good missions. When I see all of those elements in a modern skirmish game, then I know it's been developed from the ground up in the here and now. And that's what I want to kind of focus on. If it's a modern skirmish game or a new one using just recycled stuff from a previous game system, well, then I think, not that it wouldn't be interesting. You might like the mythology, you might like the miniatures, but then it tends to be, again, more of a feeder game feeding into a main system. And the focus won't be so much on skirmish in terms of rules and tactics. It'll be more of getting you into that mid-game. Now, turning over to my fellow wargaming enthusiasts, dangerous place, right? I'm planting that thought through the warp, this idea like, yeah, I could get into a new skirmish game. Maybe I should check that out, see what's out there. It's an excuse to purchase yet more miniatures and roll more dice and flip cards. But if we're talking about skirmish-type war games, new systems, right? Modern systems, what should we be looking at? What are some titles that are some really, really awesome skirmish miniature games that we should be checking out, that I should be checking out?